So in this video, I'd like to introduce some concepts about value and give you a few examples of some art that uses value in the way that I wish you to explore in this week's drawings. The idea of value, in this sense, we're using an achromatic idea of value, white, black, and all the infinite amounts of gray in between, compared to a chromatic value when we look at color and we think of the relative light and darkness of a particular color. So, high key, the idea of high key is in this example, high key is from the middle range of gray towards the light end of the scale. Low key would go from the middle range of gray to the dark side of the scale. The idea that we would be exploring value in different amounts of grays to show highlight and to show how light helps create a sense of volume and space and the illusion of three dimension. The artist Martha Alf has a series of drawings of pears, and I think this is a really good example. It's a rather shallow space. There isn't a lot of depth, but it is three-dimensional, and you can see that highlight on the right side of the pears. You can see the shadows underneath. She's using value and tonality to create and sculpt that three-dimensional space and to give it a sense of presence. You can see the cast shadow. So the idea of shading and shadow, using light to help create that three-dimensional space. The highlight on the edge of the pear, the reflective light value. Notice how we have this white negative space here. As it comes around, it becomes light on the back side of that pear to help sculpt that three dimension. The artist Morandi, in this still life, you can see value is built up with just line. It's actually an etching, but the idea of using simple line, you can see the lines, but when they get denser, it starts to become different values. See a little highlight in there, highlight on the surface, sculpting that three-dimensional space. Here on the left edge, the negative space is rather light, right? On the upper right-hand corner, the negative space is darker with that buildup of marks. So the idea of using value to help sculpt the space is what I want you to really think about and to look at the surface. And this is part of this week's drawings where I want you to think about different ways to create space. We'll be looking at 1, 2, 3-point perspective, of course, but also the values that you create. Now, in this example with Morandi, the lines that you're drawing, if you're using compressed charcoal, that's inherently going to be a darker line than graphite pencils. The amount of pressure that you put, for example. And look, just at the bottom of the Morandi, that line right there that's built up versus the light, thinner lines that are going in a different direction. The motion of those lines are really interesting for you to think about and how that creates the value. Here's another etching of a landscape, a little hint of the perspective that we'll be talking about in another video. And then the denser lines that produce darker values. So this darker, denser buildup of lines here recede. Here's some of the lighter values in the whole drawing. This sort of rectilinear shape right here really pushes forward. Okay, so we can just look at this drawing and think of that space. Chiaroscuro is another word, an Italian term used for talking about light and shade and how light and different values can help sculpt a space, right? So it's another way to help create that illusion of three-dimensional space. So in this week's drawings, I really want you to think about value, lighting. In a different video, I'm showing some surrealistic paintings, and I'm thinking of the De Chirico painting and the shadows of the De Chirico painting and how it creates a dramatic, almost mysterious, almost disturbing quality because of the quality of the light and the way the shadows are falling. It also just formally creates space. So that expressive quality in creating some kind of surreal landscape and a more literal ability to create space on a two-dimensional surface. Those are the kinds of things I want you to think about this week.